The blood had dried black in the Arizona sun by the time Garrett spotted the stagecoach listing sideways on the rocky trail, one wheel broken and hanging at an angle that spelled disaster. He pulled his mare to a halt, hand instinctively moving to the colt at his hip, squinting through the heat shimmer that made the whole scene look like something out of a fever dream. What stopped him cold was not the condition of the coach itself, but the woman standing beside it with a Winchester rifle cradled in her arms, her dark hair pulled back in a braid that hung down past her shoulders, her simple cotton dress stained with dust and what looked like dried blood. Isaac approached slowly, both hands visible now, reins loose in his left palm. "Madam, you all right out here?" She turned to face him fully, and he saw that her eyes were a startling shade of green, clear and sharp despite what must have been hours standing in the merciless sun. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, he figured, with a face that would have been pretty if not for the exhaustion etched into every line. "Depends on your definition of all right, mister. You got trouble." He nodded toward the stagecoach. "Had trouble. Past tense." Her voice was steady, which impressed him given the circumstances. Inside the coach there are 4 dead men. Driver and shotgun guard up top make 6 total. I have been standing here since yesterday afternoon making sure nobody disturbed them. Isaac felt his stomach tighten. 6 dead. What happened? Bandits hit us about 20 miles back near the pass through the Mingus Mountains. We made a run for it, got this far before the wheel gave out. She shifted the rifle slightly, not threatening, just adjusting her grip. They killed everyone but me. Why would they spare you? They did not spare me. I hid under the luggage in the boot while the shooting happened. By the time I crawled out, the bandits were gone and everyone else was dead. She met his gaze without flinching. Someone had to stay with them, could not just leave them for the vultures and coyotes. Isaac dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a mesquite bush. "That is mighty brave of you, madam. Foolish maybe, but brave. You been out here all night alone, had the rifle, had ammunition, had water from the canteens." She looked past him toward the horizon. "You the first person who has come down this trail. Was starting to think maybe nobody traveled this route anymore." "It is not the main road to Camp Verde," Isaac admitted. "I only came this way because I was tracking a wild Mustang herd, saw them heading up into the high country yesterday." He studied her more carefully now, noting the way she held herself with a kind of rigid dignity despite the obvious strain. "My name is Isaac Garrett. I run horses out near Camp Verde, got a ranch about 15 miles from town. Victoria Sutton." She finally lowered the rifle barrel toward the ground, though she kept it ready. "I was traveling from Prescott to Tucson, had family business to attend to." "Well, Miss Sutton, I think your business might have to wait a spell. We need to get you somewhere safe and report this to the law. Camp Verde has got a sheriff, and there is a cavalry post at Fort Verde nearby." Victoria looked back at the stagecoach, her expression troubled. "What about them? The men who died. They deserve a proper burial, not just getting hauled around like cargo." "They deserve justice too," Isaac said gently. "And the only way to get them that is to report what happened. Let the law track down the bandits who did this. Can you describe them? 5 of them. All wearing dusters and bandanas over their faces. One had a gray horse with white stockings. Another had a scar on his left hand. I saw it when he grabbed the strongbox from under the driver's seat." Victoria's voice remained steady, factual. "They took the box and whatever valuables the passengers had on them. They did not check the boot, did not find me." Isaac whistled low. "You got a good memory for details. That will help." He moved closer to the coach, carefully opening the door. The smell hit him immediately, that sickly sweet odor of death and heat. 4 men inside, all dressed in traveling clothes, all with bullet wounds. He closed the door respectfully. "I am sorry you had to witness this, Miss Sutton. Not your fault, still sorry." He turned back to her. "Here is what I think we should do. My horse can carry double if we go slow. We ride back to my ranch, which is closer than town. I have got a wagon there. We can take the wagon into Camp Verde, report to the sheriff, and he can organize getting the bodies brought in proper." "That sound reasonable to you?" Victoria considered this, her green eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. "All right. But I am keeping the rifle. Would not expect anything less." Isaac managed a small smile. "Though I promise you, Miss Sutton, I am not a danger to you. My mama raised me better than that. Your mama taught you to help stranded women on desert trails." "My mama taught me that decent people look after each other, especially when times are hard." He untied his horse and led her closer. "You ever ridden before?" "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I can ride." Isaac mounted first, then extended his hand down to help Victoria up behind him. She hesitated for just a moment before accepting, slinging the Winchester across her back and settling herself on the horse's rump with practiced ease. Her arms came around his waist tentatively, proper-like, maintaining as much distance as was practical given the circumstances. "Hold on tighter than that," Isaac said. "I would rather you wrinkle my shirt than fall off and break your neck." He felt her grip tighten, her hands clasping at his belt buckle, and then they were moving, leaving the broken stagecoach and its grim cargo behind in the shimmering heat. The sun beat down mercilessly as they rode, and Isaac could feel the warmth of Victoria's body pressed against his back, could hear her breathing steadily despite what must have been absolute exhaustion. "How long have you been in Arizona territory?" he asked, partly to keep her awake and partly because he was genuinely curious. "About 2 weeks. Came from Missouri originally, but my father died last year and my mother remarried. Her new husband and I did not see eye to eye on much." Victoria's voice was quiet, just loud enough to be heard over the horse's hoofbeats. "My aunt lives in Tucson. She invited me to come stay with her, help her run her boarding house. That is a big move, leaving Missouri. Nothing left for me there. My mother made her choice, and it was not me." Isaac heard the hurt beneath the matter-of-fact words. "Family can be complicated. That is putting it mildly." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What about you? You said you run horses, that a family business was." "My father started the ranch back in '68, right after the war ended. He died 3 years ago, left it to me and my brother. But my brother had wanderlust, headed off to California to seek his fortune. I stayed." Isaac guided the horse around a cluster of prickly pear cactus. "Turns out I am better with horses than I am with people anyway. You seem all right with people to me. Horses do not talk back, do not argue, and do not expect you to make conversation when you would rather just enjoy the quiet." He smiled. "Present company accepted, of course." He felt rather than heard her soft laugh, just a small exhalation against his back. "I will try not to talk too much then." "I did not mean it like that. I just meant generally speaking I prefer horses." "I understand. I prefer them to most people too." They rode in companionable silence after that, the desert landscape rolling past in shades of rust and gold. The Garrett ranch came into view about an hour later, a modest spread nestled in a valley with the Verde River running through it. The house was adobe with a wood shingled roof, nothing fancy but solid and well maintained. A barn and several corrals held various horses, and Isaac felt a surge of pride at the sight of his animals, healthy and strong in the afternoon sun. He helped Victoria down first, then dismounted himself. She stood for a moment looking around, swaying slightly on her feet, and he realized just how close to collapse she must be. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning, before we left Prescott. Right. Food first, then we ride into town. Isaac took her elbow gently, steering her toward the house. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage something decent. Victoria did not argue, which told him just how exhausted she really was. Inside, the house was cool and dim, a welcome relief from the brutal sun. Isaac settled her into a chair at the kitchen table and set about making a meal, slicing bread and ham, setting out pickles and cheese, pumping water into a pitcher. Victoria ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, and Isaac found himself watching her while pretending not to. There was something about her, some quality he could not quite name. Strength, certainly. Courage. But also a kind of quiet sadness that made him want to know her story, understand what had brought her to this place at this moment. "Thank you," she said finally, pushing away her empty plate. "I did not realize how hungry I was. You have been through hell. Body forgets about being hungry when you are just trying to survive. You speak like someone who knows." Isaac shrugged. "War taught me a few things about survival. I was young when I enlisted, just 16, lied about my age. Saw things no person should have to see." He refilled her water glass. "What you went through yesterday, standing guard over those dead men all night, that takes a particular kind of courage. Most people would have run. Where would I run to? I do not know this territory. I do not know which direction is safe. And besides," Victoria met his eyes steadily, "it just seemed like the right thing to do. They were people. They had families probably, people who loved them. They deserved someone to watch over them, even if it was just a stranger." Something shifted in Isaac's chest at those words, some recognition of a kindred spirit. "You are a good person, Victoria Sutton. I am a practical person. There is a difference. I do not think there is, not really, not where it counts." They hitched up the wagon about an hour later, once Victoria had rested a bit and washed the worst of the dust and blood from her face and hands. Isaac gave her a clean shirt to wear over her dress, knowing the evening air would turn cold, and she accepted it without complaint. The ride into Camp Verde took another 2 hours, the wagon bouncing over the rutted trail, and by the time they arrived the sun was sinking toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Camp Verde in the summer of 1874 was a small town still finding its footing, a mix of adobe buildings and wooden structures clustered near the Verde River. The cavalry fort dominated the landscape to the west, a reminder of the ongoing conflicts with Apache bands in the region. Isaac drove the wagon directly to the sheriff's office, a squat building with bars on the windows and a hitching post out front. Sheriff Tom Blackwell was a weathered man in his 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with a no-nonsense demeanor that inspired confidence. He listened to Victoria's account of the Stagecoach attack with increasing concern, making notes in a worn leather journal. 5 men, you say? One on a gray horse. That is right. And one had a scar on his left hand, like maybe from a knife wound. Blackwell exchanged a look with his deputy, a younger man named Miller. That sounds like the Carson gang. They have been hitting stages between here and Prescott for the past 3 months. We have had reports but no witnesses before now. Miss Sutton can identify them, Isaac said. Or at least some of them, which makes her valuable and possibly in danger. Blackwell leaned back in his chair, studying Victoria. If the Carson gang finds out you survived and can identify them, they might come looking to tie up loose ends. Victoria's face paled slightly, but her voice remained steady. What do you suggest? I suggest you do not go advertising your presence in town. Where were you planning to stay? I was headed to Tucson, to my aunt's boarding house. That stage does not run for another 5 days. And frankly, Miss Sutton, I would rather you stayed close until we can round up these bandits. Your testimony might be crucial for prosecution. Isaac spoke up before he could think better of it. "She can stay at my ranch. It is out of town, private. Nobody needs to know she is there." Victoria turned to look at him, surprise evident in her expression. "Mr. Garrett, I cannot impose on you like that. It is not an imposition. I have got a spare room, plenty of space, and honestly, it would ease my mind knowing you were somewhere safe." He met her gaze. "Consider it repayment for your bravery in staying with those men. Their families will get proper closure now because of you." Sheriff Blackwell nodded approvingly. "That seems like a sensible arrangement. I will send word to Fort Verde, see if the cavalry can spare some men to help search for the Carson gang. In the meantime, Miss Sutton, you lie low and stay safe." They left the sheriff's office as dusk settled over the valley, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Victoria was quiet on the drive back to the ranch, and Isaac respected her silence, understanding that she needed time to process everything that had happened. It was only when they were halfway home that she finally spoke. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. I could be anyone." Isaac considered the question carefully. "You know that moment when you look at someone and you just know they are decent, that they are worth helping. I had that moment when I saw you standing guard over those dead men. Not many people would have done that, Victoria. Not many people have that kind of integrity, or that kind of stubbornness," he laughed. "Maybe that too, but I will take stubborn and honorable over weak and dishonest any day of the week." Back at the ranch, Isaac showed Victoria to the spare bedroom, a small but comfortable space with a window overlooking the corrals. He brought her fresh water for washing, clean linens for the bed, and a nightgown that had belonged to his mother, stored away since her death 5 years prior. "It might be a bit old-fashioned," he said apologetically, "but it is clean and it will be more comfortable than sleeping in your dress." Victoria took the garment carefully, running her fingers over the soft cotton. "Thank you for everything. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "No repayment necessary. Just get some rest. You have earned it." But sleep did not come easily for either of them that night. Isaac lay in his own bed listening to the sounds of the ranch, the horses shifting in their stalls, the wind whistling through the eaves, and found himself thinking about the green-eyed woman sleeping down the hall. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin, some combination of vulnerability and strength that drew him in despite his usual preference for solitude. In her room, Victoria stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the dead men in the stagecoach, the sound of gunfire, the terror of hiding under luggage while murder happened all around her. But eventually exhaustion won out over memory, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with fragmentary dreams. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Victoria woke to the smell of coffee and bacon drifting through the house. She dressed quickly in her clean dress and made her way to the kitchen, where Isaac was flipping pancakes on a cast-iron griddle. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Hope you slept all right. Better than the night before, certainly." Victoria accepted the coffee he poured for her, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "You did not have to go to all this trouble." "No trouble. I have to eat anyway, might as well cook for two." He slid pancakes onto plates, added bacon and a drizzle of honey. "I thought after breakfast I could show you around the ranch if you are interested, or you could rest more if you need to." "I would like to see the ranch. I have been sitting or standing still for too long. I need to move." They ate together in companionable silence, and then Isaac led her outside into the morning sun. The ranch was more extensive than Victoria had realized the previous evening, with multiple corrals holding different groups of horses, a good-sized barn, and beyond it all, pastureland stretching toward the distant mountains. "This is beautiful," Victoria said, shading her eyes to take it all in. How many horses do you have? About 40 right now. I break and train them, sell them to ranchers, the army, sometimes private buyers looking for good riding stock. Isaac leaned against the corral fence, watching a group of young horses mill around. That bay gelding there, he will make someone a fine cow pony, smart as they come. Victoria studied the horses with genuine interest. Do you do all the training yourself? Mostly. I have got a hand who helps out, old man named Pete Donovan. He comes by 3 days a week, helps with the heavy work, but the actual training, the breaking and gentling, that is all me. Isaac turned to look at her. You said you grew up on a farm, you know horses. Well enough. We had draft horses for plowing, a few riding horses, I learned young. Victoria reached out to stroke the nose of a curious mare who had come to investigate the visitors. My father used to say I had a gift with them, that I could gentle the wildest horse with enough patience. Is that something you would want to do, gentling horses? She looked at him curiously. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Garrett? Isaac. And maybe I am. You need somewhere to stay while the law hunts down the Carson gang, and I could use help around here. Pete is getting on in years, and having someone who knows horses would be useful. He shrugged, trying to appear casual despite the fact that his heart was beating faster. Just a thought. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her hand still resting on the mare's nose. I would need to send word to my aunt in Tucson, let her know what happened and why I am delayed. We can do that. There is a telegraph office in town. And I would want to contribute, not just live off your charity. If you are serious about me working here, I would expect fair wages. Isaac felt a smile tugging at his lips. Fair wages, room and board, and all the horse talk you can stand. Do we have a deal, Miss Sutton? She turned to face him fully, extending her hand. We have a deal, Mr. Garrett, though you should probably call me Victoria if we are going to be working together. Victoria it is. He shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the calluses that spoke of hard work and determination. Welcome to the Garrett Ranch. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. Victoria proved herself knowledgeable and capable with the horses, working alongside Isaac with a quiet competence that earned his respect. She had a gentle way about her, a patience that the animals responded to, and more than once Isaac found himself stopping his own work just to watch her move through a training session, her voice low and soothing as she worked with a skittish colt or a stubborn mare. They talked while they worked, sharing stories about their lives in the careful way of people getting to know each other. Victoria told him about growing up in Missouri, about her father's death, and her mother's quick remarriage to a man who saw Victoria as an inconvenience rather than a daughter. Isaac spoke about his own losses, his father's death, his brother's departure, the loneliness of running a ranch alone even when you loved the work. You ever think about leaving? Victoria asked one afternoon as they mended fence in the south pasture. Going somewhere else, starting over. Sometimes. But then I look at this land, these horses, and I think about my father working himself half to death to build something lasting. Seems wrong to just walk away from that. Isaac hammered a nail into a fence post, testing its strength. What about you? Still planning to go to Tucson once the sheriff says it is safe. Victoria was quiet for longer than the question warranted. I do not know any more. I sent word to my aunt, told her what happened. She wrote back saying I was welcome whenever I could make it, but there was no urgency. And honestly, she looked around at the ranch, at the horses grazing peacefully in the distance. I like it here. I like the work. I like the quiet. Just the work and the quiet, Isaac asked, trying to keep his tone light even as his pulse quickened. She met his eyes with that direct green gaze that never failed to make him feel slightly off balance. The company is tolerable too. Tolerable. High praise indeed. Well, I would not want you getting a swelled head, thinking you are charming or anything." Isaac laughed, genuine and full, and realized he had been doing that more in the past week than he had in the past year. There was something about Victoria that brought out a lighter side of him, made him remember there was more to life than just work and solitude. Sheriff Blackwell rode out to the ranch about 10 days after the Stagecoach incident, his expression grim. Isaac and Victoria met him in the yard, and Isaac felt Victoria tense beside him at the sheriff's serious demeanor. "We found the Carson gang," Blackwell said without preamble. "Or rather, the cavalry did. They were holed up in a box canyon about 30 miles north of here. There was a firefight. 3 of the gang members are dead, 1 wounded and in custody, 1 escaped." "Which one escaped?" Victoria asked, her voice steady despite the worry Isaac could see in her eyes. According to the wounded man, it was Frank Carson himself, the leader, the man with the gray horse. Blackwell dismounted, accepting the water Isaac offered him. "The good news is the wounded man is talking, confirming your description of the robbery and giving us information about other crimes the gang committed. The bad news is Carson is still out there, and according to our source, he is angry about losing his men. Does he know about Victoria?" Isaac asked, his hand moving unconsciously to rest on Victoria's shoulder. "The wounded man says they knew, they left no witnesses. But Carson is cautious, might come back to the site to make sure. We have men watching the Stagecoach site, but I wanted to warn you to stay alert." Blackwell looked directly at Victoria. "I do not mean to frighten you, Miss Sutton, but a cornered man is dangerous, and Carson has nothing left to lose." "I understand. Thank you for the warning, Sheriff." After Blackwell left, Isaac insisted on teaching Victoria to shoot with his spare revolver. They set up targets behind the barn, tin cans and old bottles, and he stood behind her showing her how to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger rather than jerking it. "I know how to shoot a rifle," Victoria protested, though she followed his instructions. "A pistol cannot be that different. It is different enough. Rifle, you have got time to aim, brace yourself. Pistol is quick and close. You need to be able to draw and fire without thinking." Isaac adjusted her stance slightly, his hands on her waist, and tried to ignore the way his breath caught at the contact. "Try again." She fired, and this time the can jumped and spun. Victoria lowered the gun, a smile of satisfaction crossing her face. "Better, much better. You are a natural." They practiced until the sun began to set, until Victoria could draw and fire with reasonable accuracy, until Isaac felt marginally better about her ability to defend herself if necessary. But that night he lay awake listening to every sound outside, his own gun within easy reach, unable to shake the worry that gnawed at him. It was not just concern for a friend or a ranch hand, he realized. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Victoria Sutton had become essential to him in a way he had not anticipated and was not entirely sure how to handle. The thought of anything happening to her made his chest tight with a fear he had not felt since the war. The days continued, and no sign of Frank Carson appeared. Victoria settled further into life on the ranch, and Isaac found himself inventing excuses to work alongside her, to hear her laugh, to see the way the sun brought out copper highlights in her dark hair. He caught her watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something between curiosity and what might have been longing. One evening after supper, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Victoria had been unusually quiet all day, and Isaac finally asked what was on her mind. "I was thinking about those men in the Stagecoach," she said softly. "Wondering if their families got word if they had proper funerals, wondering if standing guard over them actually mattered in the end." "It mattered," Isaac said firmly. You gave them dignity in death, Victoria. You made sure they were not forgotten, not abandoned. That matters more than you know. I keep thinking, what if I had done something different? What if I had not hidden, had tried to help somehow? You would be dead too, and then nobody would have survived to tell what happened, to help bring the Carson gang to justice. Isaac reached over and took her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. You did everything right, Victoria. You survived. That is what matters. She turned to look at him, and in the dim light her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Why do you care so much? Why does it matter to you whether I blame myself or not? Isaac knew this was the moment, the point where he could retreat back into safe distance or step forward into uncertain territory. He chose the latter. Because in the past 2 weeks, you have become important to me. Because I look forward to seeing you every morning and I dread saying good night every evening. Because when Sheriff Blackwell told us Frank Carson was still out there, my first thought was that I would do whatever it took to keep you safe, even if it cost me everything I have built here. Victoria's breath caught audibly. Isaac, I know it is probably too soon. I know you were just passing through, headed to Tucson to start a new life. But I need you to know how I feel, Victoria. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you standing guard over those dead men with your rifle and your courage and your refusal to leave them alone. Too soon, Victoria laughed, but it was not a mocking sound. Isaac, I think I started falling for you when you offered me food and shelter without asking for anything in return. When you showed me the horses and talked about your father with such love and respect. When you held me steady while teaching me to shoot and your hands were so gentle despite their strength. He stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. You feel the same way. I feel the same way. She squeezed his hand. I was terrified to admit it, even to myself. After everything with my mother's remarriage, after feeling so unwanted and in the way, I thought maybe I was not meant for this kind of happiness. But then you looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just an inconvenience or an obligation, and I started to hope again. Isaac pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and felt her rest her head against his chest. They sat like that as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against impossible odds in the harsh Arizona territory, and Isaac felt something settle in his soul that had been restless for years. Stay, he said quietly. Not just until Carson is caught or until you feel obligated. Stay because you want to, because this is where you belong. Stay and help me run this ranch, build something together. Stay and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Victoria pulled back just far enough to look up at him. Are you asking me to marry you, Isaac Garrett? I suppose I am. Though I did not plan it quite this way, did not get down on one knee or have a ring ready or any of the romantic gestures a woman should have. I do not need romantic gestures. I need honesty and respect and someone who sees me as an equal partner. Can you give me that? Every day for the rest of my life? Then yes. Yes, I will marry you. Isaac kissed her then, gentle at first and then deeper, pouring all his hope and love and promise into that connection. Victoria responded with equal fervor, her arms coming up around his neck. And for a long moment, the world consisted of nothing but the two of them and the stars overhead, and the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. The next morning they rode into Camp Verde together to share the news with Sheriff Blackwell and arrange for a preacher to perform the ceremony. The sheriff congratulated them warmly, though he cautioned that Frank Carson was still at large and they should remain vigilant. Isaac assured him they would, but privately he thought that Carson had likely fled the territory entirely by now, seeking safer ground away from the cavalry and the law. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Sheriff Blackwell and his deputy as witnesses, and old Pete Donovan playing a fiddle that had seen better days. Victoria wore a simple blue dress purchased in town, and Isaac wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage, and Isaac barely heard the words because he was too focused on Victoria's face, radiant with joy and promise. When they were pronounced man and wife, Isaac kissed her with all the tenderness he possessed, and the small gathering applauded. They celebrated with a meal Isaac and Victoria had prepared together, beef and potatoes and fresh bread. And afterwards, Pete played the fiddle while the newlyweds danced in the yard under the late afternoon sun. That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, they came together with a passion tempered by gentleness, learning each other's bodies with reverence and care. Victoria had been nervous, admitting her inexperience, but Isaac took his time, making sure her first time was everything it should be, filled with pleasure rather than pain, connection rather than conquest. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the sheets, Victoria traced patterns on Isaac's chest with her fingertips. "I never imagined this," she said softly. "When I left Missouri, I thought I was heading toward a life of quiet service, helping my aunt run her boarding house, maybe eventually finding someone suitable to marry. I never imagined finding you. I never imagined finding anyone," Isaac admitted. "After my father died and my brother left, I convinced myself I was meant to be alone, that I was too set in my ways to share my life with someone. But you changed all that, Victoria. You walked into my life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Do you think we are rushing this, getting married so quickly? Do you feel like we are rushing?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "No, I feel like we are grabbing onto something good before life has a chance to take it away. I feel like maybe this is what it means to really live, to take chances on happiness even when it seems impossible. Then we are not rushing. We are just being practical, stubborn people who know what we want." She laughed and kissed him, and they made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and taste and whispered endearment. Isaac had never felt more connected to another person, more certain that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Isaac's life. He and Victoria worked the ranch together, their partnership seamless in a way that surprised them both. She proved to have a good head for business as well as a gift with the horses, and under her influence, Isaac began expanding their operations, taking on more clients, building a reputation for quality stock and honest dealing. They heard no more about Frank Carson, and as the summer wore into fall, Isaac began to relax his vigilance. Sheriff Blackwell reported that the wounded gang member had been tried and sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison, and that based on information from various sources, Carson had likely fled into Mexico or California. Victoria gradually stopped checking the windows at night, stopped carrying the pistol Isaac had given her everywhere she went. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. They woke early, worked hard through the day, and spent their evenings talking or reading or simply enjoying each other's company. Isaac taught Victoria the finer points of horse training, and she taught him patience he had not known he possessed. They made love frequently, their passion undiminished by familiarity, and Isaac found himself thinking about the future in ways he never had before. One evening in late October, as they prepared supper together, Victoria placed Isaac's hand on her stomach and said quietly, "I think I am with child." Isaac froze, his brain taking a moment to process the words. "You think or you know?" "I am fairly certain. I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings." She looked up at him, a mix of joy and nervousness in her expression. "Are you happy about this?" "Happy." Isaac picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "Victoria, I am thrilled." Terrified but thrilled. Terrified why? Because I want to be a good father and I have no idea how. Because I want to keep you and the baby safe and the world is dangerous. Because this is real now, we are building a family and that feels enormous and wonderful and scary all at once. Victoria cupped his face in her hands, her green eyes serious. "We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else. You are going to be a wonderful father, Isaac. I have seen how gentle you are with the horses, how patient with the difficult ones. You will be the same with our child. Our child." Isaac said the words aloud, testing them, and felt a surge of protective love so powerful it nearly staggered him. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Victoria confirmed. And then she was crying and laughing at the same time, and Isaac was holding her, and everything felt right with the world. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Victoria continued working with the horses until her growing belly made it impractical. And then she shifted her focus to managing the business side of the ranch, keeping ledgers and corresponding with clients, and organizing the household. Isaac tried to convince her to rest more, but she refused, insisting that she felt healthy, and that work kept her mind occupied. In December, Sheriff Blackwell rode out to the ranch with news. "We got confirmation that Frank Carson was killed in a bar fight in Tombstone last month. Apparently he got drunk and drew on the wrong man. It is over, Mrs. Garrett. You can stop looking over your shoulder." Victoria thanked him for the information, and after he left she turned to Isaac with a wondering expression. "It is really over. That part of my life, the fear and the uncertainty. It is finished. Now you can focus on the future instead of worrying about the past." "Our future," she corrected, placing her hands on her swollen belly. "All three of us." The baby came in late March of 1875. Born in the bedroom Isaac had once offered to Victoria as a temporary refuge, and which had become their shared sanctuary. The labor was long and difficult, and Isaac spent hours pacing the front room while the midwife from town worked with Victoria, her occasional cries of pain making him want to break down the door and demand to help somehow. But finally, as dawn broke over the valley, Isaac heard a different sound. The thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. The midwife emerged from the bedroom, wiping her hands on a cloth, her face creased in a tired smile. "You have a son, Mr. Garrett, healthy and strong with a good set of lungs. Your wife is tired but doing well. You can go in now." Isaac entered the bedroom on shaking legs to find Victoria propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms she held a tiny bundle, and as Isaac approached he caught his first glimpse of his son, wrinkled and red-faced with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through him. "He is perfect," Isaac breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are perfect." "I cannot believe you did this." "We did this," Victoria corrected, carefully placing the baby in Isaac's arms. "Meet your son." Isaac held the infant with the care he might give a newborn foal, terrified of doing something wrong but unable to resist the overwhelming surge of love that filled him. His son. His and Victoria's son, proof of their love and commitment, the future they were building together. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked sleepily, her eyes already starting to close with exhaustion. They had discussed names before but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son in the dawn light, Isaac thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The broken stagecoach, Victoria's courage, the chance meeting that had changed both their lives forever. What about Samuel? It means God has heard or asked of God. Seems fitting somehow. Victoria smiled without opening her eyes. Samuel Garrett, I like it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world. The first year of Samuel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and exhausted days, but Isaac would not have traded it for anything. Watching Victoria mother their son, seeing the tender way she held him and sang to him and loved him fiercely, only deepened Isaac's feelings for his wife. And watching Samuel grow from a red-faced newborn into a smiling, cooing baby who clearly recognized his parents filled Isaac with a pride and joy he had never imagined possible. The ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of Garrett horses, and they began receiving orders from as far away as Texas and California. Isaac hired additional help, young men eager to learn the horse trade, and Victoria proved to be an excellent manager, organizing the work and keeping everything running smoothly, even while caring for a young child. On their second anniversary, Isaac gave Victoria a necklace he had commissioned from a jeweler in Prescott, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a horse. Victoria cried when she saw it, telling him it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. "You have given me everything," she said, clutching the necklace. "A home, a family, a purpose. You have given me a life I never dared dream of." "You gave me the same thing," Isaac replied, pulling her close. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me live again, Victoria. You made me remember what it means to hope and dream and love." They made love that night with the quiet intensity of long-married partners who still found endless fascination in each other. And Isaac thought that this was what happiness meant. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the everyday miracle of waking up next to the person you loved, building a life together one small choice at a time. By the time Samuel was 2, Victoria was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the autumn of 1877 she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, for the unexpected blessing she represented. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Isaac and Victoria marveled at how their family continued to grow and thrive. The years flowed past like the Verde River, constant and life-giving. The ranch expanded, buildings were added, more hands were hired. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Grace was her mother's daughter, strong-willed and clever, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. A third child arrived when Grace was 3, another son they named Thomas, who proved to be the wild one, always climbing things and getting into mischief. Through it all, Isaac and Victoria's love remained the foundation on which everything else was built. They still worked side by side, still talked late into the night, still found moments of passion amid the chaos of raising children and running a ranch. They weathered droughts and disputes with neighbors, sick horses and financial setbacks, always facing challenges together as a team. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch while the children played in the yard, and Victoria would sometimes reminisce about that day on the desert trail, the broken stagecoach and the dead men she had refused to abandon. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had taken a different route that day?" she asked once. "If you had not come along when you did?" "I do not wonder," Isaac replied, "because it did not happen that way. I found you, you stayed, and we built this life together. That is the only story that matters." "Someone had to stay," Victoria said softly, echoing the words she had spoken that first day. "I thought I meant staying with those dead men, doing the right thing. But maybe I was also talking about staying here in Arizona at this ranch. Staying with you and the life we built." "You gave me a reason to want someone to stay," Isaac said. Before you, I thought I preferred being alone. You taught me that the right person does not make you feel crowded or trapped. The right person makes you feel more yourself than you ever could alone. As the 1880s arrived, the Garrett Ranch had become one of the most respected horse operations in Arizona Territory. Samuel was now a capable young man of 15, already showing his father's gift with horses. Grace, at 13, helped her mother manage the household and the business accounts. Thomas, at 10, was still a handful but showed promise as a rider. And Isaac and Victoria, now in their 40s, looked at everything they had built with satisfaction and gratitude. They still made time for each other, still slipped away for rides across their land, still found moments of privacy to reconnect as husband and wife, and not just parents and business partners. The passion between them had evolved but not diminished, deepening into something more profound than simple desire. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Victoria leaned against Isaac's shoulder and said, "I have been thinking about adding on to the house. Samuel will want his own place eventually when he finds a wife, but until then we could use more room. Sounds practical. Though I am not sure I am ready to think about Samuel getting married. He is still a boy in my mind. He is 15, the same age you were when you joined the army. Old enough to start thinking about his future." Victoria paused, then added, "And old enough to hear the story of how we met. The real story, not the simplified version we have told the children." Isaac considered this. They had always been honest with their children, but had downplayed the more dangerous and violent aspects of their first meeting, not wanting to frighten them. But perhaps it was time to share the full truth, to let Samuel and Grace and Thomas understand the courage their mother had shown, the random chance that had brought their parents together. That night, with all three children gathered in the front room, Isaac and Victoria told them everything. About the Stagecoach attack, the dead men Victoria had guarded, the Carson gang, and the months of fear before Frank Carson's death brought closure. The children listened with wide eyes, asking questions, trying to imagine their mother standing alone on a desert trail with a rifle. "You were so brave, Mama," Grace said when the story was finished. "I do not know if I could have done that, staying there all night with those poor men." "You could have," Victoria said firmly. "When the moment comes, when you are tested, you find strength you did not know you possessed. The important thing is to do what is right even when it is hard, even when it would be easier to run or hide." "Is that why you stayed at the ranch?" Samuel asked his father. "Because Mama needed help and it was the right thing to do?" "Initially, yes. But I stayed because I fell in love with her, because I realized she was the person I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. The right thing to do became the best thing I ever did." The children seemed to understand, nodding thoughtfully, and Isaac felt a surge of pride at how well they had turned out. He and Victoria had built more than just a successful ranch. They had created a family grounded in love and respect and hard work, values that would hopefully carry forward into future generations. As the 1890s approached, changes came to Arizona Territory. Towns grew larger, the railroad expanded its reach, and the wild frontier gradually became more settled and civilized. The conflicts with Apache bands that had once made travel dangerous were largely resolved through a combination of military action and treaty negotiations. Camp Verde grew from a rough frontier town into a more established community with schools and churches and regular law enforcement. Through all these changes, the Garrett Ranch remained a constant, a place of stability and tradition. Samuel took over more of the day-to-day operations, allowing Isaac to step back slightly, and it gave Isaac and Victoria more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They took long rides together like they had in their early years, rediscovering the land they had built their life upon. Grace announced her engagement at 18 to a young man named David Morrison, a teacher who had come to Camp Verde from Boston. Isaac was skeptical at first, protective of his daughter, but Victoria reminded him that Grace was smart and capable and had chosen well. The wedding was a large affair, with friends and neighbors from throughout the territory attending, and Isaac walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Thomas, true to his wild nature, joined the cavalry for a few years before returning to the ranch with stories of adventure and a greater appreciation for the stability of home. He married a local girl, the daughter of a rancher from the next valley, and they settled on a portion of the Garrett land, building their own home and starting their own herd. And Samuel, the serious oldest son, fell in love with the daughter of a horse trader from Prescott. When he brought her home to meet his parents, Isaac saw in the young woman's eyes something that reminded him of Victoria: strength, intelligence, and a genuine love for the land and the work. He gave his blessing gladly, and Samuel married at 22, building his own house on the ranch and preparing to eventually take over the entire operation. Isaac and Victoria, now grandparents multiple times over, settled into the comfortable rhythm of older age. They still worked when they wanted to, still helped with the horses and the business, but they also made time for leisure, for reading and conversation and simply being together. One evening, sitting on their porch as they had done countless times over the years, Victoria reached over and took Isaac's hand. "Do you have any regrets? Anything you wish we had done differently?" Isaac thought about the question seriously. "I regret that I could not save you from experiencing that stagecoach attack, could not spare you that trauma, but I do not regret anything that came after. Every choice we made, every challenge we faced, it all led us here, and here is pretty wonderful." "I have no regrets either," Victoria said. "Not one. Even the terrible things, the frightening times, they were all part of the journey that brought us to this moment." "Someone had to stay," Isaac said, echoing her words from that first day, "and I am so grateful it was you. That you stayed with those men, that you stayed at my ranch, that you stayed in my life through everything." "I stayed because I found something worth staying for," Victoria replied. "You, this life, this family, it is more than I ever dreamed of when I left Missouri all those years ago." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children and grandchildren. The ranch stretched out around them, buildings and corrals and pastures that represented decades of hard work and love and commitment. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing, Samuel's children and Grace's visiting from town and Thomas's from the next valley over. The sound of laughter and running feet, of life continuing into the next generation, filled Isaac with a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "We did all right," he said finally. "You and me, we built something good here." "We built something lasting," Victoria corrected. "Something that will continue long after we are gone. The children understand the value of hard work and honesty and treating others with respect. They understand that family is not just blood but choice, commitment, showing up every day even when it is hard." "They learned that from you," Isaac said. "I was just the stubborn horse rancher who got lucky enough to find you on a desert trail. You were the man who saw someone in trouble and stopped to help without asking for anything in return. You were the man who gave me shelter and safety and then gave me his heart. Do not sell yourself short, Isaac Garrett." He leaned over and kissed her, this woman who had turned his life upside down and inside out in the best possible way. Even after nearly 30 years of marriage, Kissing Victoria still made his heart race, still made him feel like the luckiest man alive. As they grew older, their roles on the ranch shifted further. Samuel took over as the primary owner and operator, with his siblings as partners, and Isaac and Victoria became the wise elders, consulted for advice but no longer burdened with daily decisions. They spent their time with grandchildren, passing on stories and skills, teaching the next generation about horses and hard work and integrity. Isaac's health began to fail in his late 60s, his body worn down by decades of physical labor. Victoria nursed him through increasingly frequent sick spells, and he tried not to complain, not wanting to burden her with his weakness. But Victoria would have none of it. In sickness and health, she reminded him firmly. "We made vows, Isaac. I am not going anywhere." "You have already given me more years than I deserve," he said during one particularly difficult night. "I wish I could give you more, wish I could be strong for you the way I used to be." "You are still strong," Victoria insisted. "Strength is not just physical. You are strong in your love, in your commitment, in your refusal to give up even when things are hard. That is the strength that matters." Isaac recovered from that particular illness, and they had several more good years together. Years of watching their grandchildren grow and their great-grandchildren arrive. Years of sitting on the porch and talking about everything and nothing. Years of simple companionship that meant more than any grand adventure. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the house and yard, and Isaac looked around at all of them. All these lives that existed because he had taken a different route through the desert one day in 1874. Victoria stood beside him, her dark hair now silver, her green eyes still sharp and clear, and Isaac thought she had never been more beautiful. She had aged with grace, her strength undiminished by the passing years, and he loved her more at 67 than he had at 22. That night, alone in their bedroom after all the guests had departed, they made love one final time with all the tenderness and passion of a lifetime together. Isaac held Victoria close afterwards, feeling her heart beat against his chest, and thought that he was ready whenever his time came because he had lived fully and loved completely. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what? For staying. For choosing me, choosing this life. For giving me everything I did not know I needed." Victoria pulled back to look at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You gave me the same gift, Isaac. You saw me when I felt invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. Thank you for finding me that day, for stopping instead of riding past." "I would find you again in every lifetime," Isaac promised. "On every trail, in every version of the world that exists, I would always find you and always stay." Isaac Garrett died peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, at the age of 70, with Victoria holding his hand. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Arizona territory, people who had known him, done business with him, or simply heard stories about the honest horse rancher who had built an empire through hard work and integrity. Victoria grieved deeply but with dignity, supported by her children and grandchildren. She continued living at the ranch, helping where she could, spending time with family, and often sitting on the porch where she and Isaac had spent so many evenings together. She lived another 12 years, dying at 82, surrounded by multiple generations of the family she and Isaac had created. Her last words, according to Grace, who sat with her at the end, were about that day in the desert, the day that had changed everything. "Someone had to stay," Victoria whispered, her green eyes fading. "And I am so glad it was me, so glad he found me, so glad we stayed together." They buried Victoria next to Isaac on a hill overlooking the ranch, with headstones that listed their names and dates, but also bore a simple inscription chosen by their children. They built something lasting. The ranch continued to operate under the Garrett name, passing through generations, and on warm evenings when the stars came out, family members would sometimes swear they could feel the presence of the couple who had started it all, still watching over the land they loved. The story of how Isaac and Victoria met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The broken stagecoach, the dead men, Victoria's courage in staying when she could have fled, Isaac's kindness in stopping to help a stranger, the love that grew between them against the harsh backdrop of the Arizona Territory in the 1870s. Samuel's great-granddaughter, researching family history in the 1950s, found newspaper accounts of the Carson gang's attacks and Victoria's testimony in faded archives. She also found the marriage record, the deeds to ranch properties, birth certificates and death certificates that documented the progression of a life well lived. But what she could not find in any archive or record was the true heart of the story. The way Isaac's hands had trembled the first time he held Victoria's, the sound of her laughter echoing across the ranch yard, the fierce protectiveness they had felt for each other from that very first meeting. Those things lived only in memory now, in stories passed down through the family, in the continuation of values and traditions that Isaac and Victoria had established. The ranch itself stood as their greatest legacy, still operating, still raising horses, still grounded in the principles of hard work and honest dealing that Isaac had learned from his father and passed on to his children. The house had been expanded and modernized over the decades, but the original adobe structure remained at its core, and family members could still stand in the bedroom where Isaac and Victoria had slept for 40 years and feel the weight of history and love. On the 100th anniversary of Isaac and Victoria's wedding, the family held a massive reunion at the ranch. Descendants came from across the country, dozens of people who existed because a cowboy had taken a different route through the desert and found a woman guarding a stagecoach full of dead men. They held a ceremony at the graves on the hill, placing new flowers and sharing stories, and the oldest family members spoke about what Isaac and Victoria had meant, the example they had set. "They taught us that love is a choice you make every day," Samuel's oldest granddaughter said, now a woman in her 70s herself. "Not just a feeling but an action, a commitment to show up and do the work even when it is hard. They taught us that family is built on respect and partnership, that no one person is more important than another. And they taught us that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, if you have the courage to stay when it would be easier to run." As the sun set over the ranch that day, painting the sky in the brilliant colors Isaac and Victoria had watched so many times, the family felt a sense of continuity, of connection to something larger than themselves. The love story that had started on a dusty trail in 1874 continued to ripple forward through time, affecting lives not yet born, creating futures not yet imagined. And somewhere in the whisper of wind through the cottonwood trees, in the sound of horses moving in the corrals, in the laughter of children playing in the yard, the spirits of Isaac and Victoria Garrett watched over it all, satisfied with what they had built together, grateful for the chance meeting that had changed everything, and still, even in whatever came after, deeply and eternally in love. The legacy of that single moment, when Isaac chose to stop and help rather than ride past, when Victoria chose to trust rather than flee, lived on in every descendant who valued integrity over convenience, love over fear, commitment over comfort. They had built something lasting, something true, something that proved love could flourish even in the harshest environments if two people were willing to stay, to work, to choose each other every single day. Someone had to stay, Victoria had said all those years ago. And in staying, in choosing love and courage and commitment, she and Isaac had created something that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy written not just in land and buildings and business success, but in the hearts and lives of everyone who came after them, carrying forward the values and the love story that had started it all.